Seraphine learned early that a Luna does not cry in front of her pack. She learned it the first winter after her bonding ceremony, when she stood at the great hall window, watching snow fall on the territory, and felt something hollow move through her chest. Kael had not come home that night. He had sent a messenger instead. 3 words on a folded piece of paper. Council ran late. She had folded it smaller and smaller until it fit in her fist, and then she had walked to her bathroom, turned on the faucet, and cried with her back against the cold tile wall. She still did that. 7 years later, she still turned the faucet on. It was not that Kael was cruel. That would have been easier, in some ways. Cruelty leaves marks you can point to. What Kael gave her instead was indifference, so polished it looked like dignity. He stood beside her at every formal gathering, his hand at the small of her back at exactly the right moments, his jaw set in that way that made the whole pack feel safe. He was everything an alpha king was supposed to be. He was just never quite there for her. She had made her peace with it. That was what she told herself on the long nights when she ate dinner alone in a dining room built for 30, her fork tapping the edge of a plate no one had cooked with love. She had made her peace with it. She was a Luna. She had a purpose. She kept the pack women steady when the men went to the border. She negotiated small things, supply agreements, healer visits between packs, the careful keeping of old alliances. She was good at it, better than Kael, who was built for force rather than conversation. She had made her peace with it. Then came the autumn gathering. Of 3 packs. 1 great lodge built into the hillside where their territories touched. 2 nights of careful eating and careful speaking, and everyone being very polite about the things no one wanted to say directly. Seraphine wore a deep green dress, and her mother's earrings, and the expression she had spent 7 years perfecting. Warm, present, completely unreadable on the inside. She was standing beside Kael when the delegation from the Western Range arrived. The alpha who led them was called Darian. She had heard his name in border reports. Young for his rank, fair in his negotiations, difficult to read. She had formed a picture of him from those reports. The picture was wrong. He was not what she expected. He was not loud or large in the way that most alphas made their presence known. He moved through the room like someone who had nothing to prove, which was its own kind of power. He had dark eyes that found things slowly, taking their time. When Kael introduced them, Darian looked at her for 1 moment longer than was necessary, and then he looked away, and she felt something she could not name. She filed it away and forgot it. The evening moved the way those evenings always moved. Speeches, toasts, the careful performance of alliance. Kael was pulled aside by the Eastern Alpha's council, not 20 minutes into dinner, and she watched him go, and understood that she would spend the rest of the night managing his absence. She was very good at that too. By 10 o'clock she needed air. The balcony at the back of the lodge looked out over the tree line, all dark pines, and the first cold edge of autumn. She stood there with a glass of wine she did not particularly want, and let herself breathe without performing it. The sounds from inside went soft and far away. The trees were very still. She was not thinking about anything specific. She was just tired in that particular way that has nothing to do with sleep. She did not hear him come out. She only became aware of Darian when he was already there, several feet to her left, leaning against the railing with his own glass, and his eyes on the same tree line she had been watching. He did not speak. He did not look at her. He simply stood there, as if the balcony belonged to both of them equally, and always had. She should have asked him to leave. She did not. That was the thing she would think about later, in the days that followed. Not anything he said or did, but the simple fact that she had not asked him to leave. In 7 years of needing space from her own grief, she had always, eventually, asked people to leave. It was the one boundary she kept perfectly. She did not keep it that night. They stood there for a long time. The wine went warm in her hand. An owl moved through the trees below, silent and enormous. At some point Darian said, quietly and without looking at her, "It is a good thing, sometimes, standing outside a room you do not quite belong in." She did not answer. She was not sure he expected her to. She went back inside 10 minutes later. She did not cry that night, which was unusual. 4 weeks later, Kael sent her to the border talks in his place. This happened more than people knew. Kael understood, without ever saying so plainly, that Seraphine was better in a room than he was. She read people, she knew when to be quiet and when to press, and she never pressed so hard that anyone lost face. He trusted her with the conversations that required patience rather than power. He just did not trust her with much else. The border talks were 3 days in a neutral territory lodge, 2 delegates from each pack, maps and old agreements spread across a long wooden table. Darian was across from her. The first day they were formal. The second day they were efficient. By the third day, something had settled between them that was harder to name. A mutual recognition, maybe. The sense that they were both thinking at the same speed, and it was a relief to be in a room with someone who did not require slowing down. On the last evening, the others had gone to their rooms, and the two of them were left at the table with the remains of dinner and a fire that had burned itself low. He said, "Can I ask you something directly?" She said yes, because she was tired of indirectness. "How long have you been performing being fine?" The question sat between them like something breakable. She looked at the fire for a moment. "I am not sure I know what you mean." "I think you do," he said. And then he did not push it, which was somehow worse and better at once. After a long silence, she said, 7 years is a long time to be last on someone's list. He nodded. He did not fill the space after it with sympathy or with solutions. He just let the sentence exist. She went to her room an hour later and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a while. Not crying, just feeling the shape of what she had said out loud for the first time to another person. It was strange. It felt like something setting a bone back into place. Painful and necessary, and immediately, quietly better. She did not expect to see him again so soon. He came to the territory 3 weeks later, a formal visit about supply routes, the kind of thing that generated paperwork and not much else. Kael shook his hand and handed him off to Seraphine, because Kael had real things to attend to. She walked with Darian through the eastern market, pointing out the trading posts and the storage structures, giving him the information he needed for his route maps. He listened carefully and asked good questions, and at a certain point, she realized they had finished the actual business and were simply walking together through the afternoon market, talking about nothing important, and she could not quite remember when the shift had happened. At the edge of the market, where the path turned back toward the lodge, he stopped. He said, "I have to tell you something." She turned to face him. "The night on the balcony," he said. "My wolf knew something before I understood it." He was looking at her very steadily. "You are my true mate." She felt the air go strange. "I am not telling you this to ask you for anything," he said, before she could speak. "And I am not challenging Kael. That is not what this is. I am telling you because you deserve to know that a choice exists. That is all." He left that evening. He left her standing at the edge of the market with the smell of pine on the air, and a sky going the color of a bruise, and the quiet understanding that somewhere in the last few weeks, she had started living again, and had not noticed until just this moment. She did not decide anything immediately. She went home, and she cooked her own dinner, and she sat at the long table alone, and she thought for a very long time. She thought about 7 years of faucets running. She thought about 3 days across a table from someone who spoke to her like she was a person rather than a position. She thought about the specific loneliness of being in a room with your mate and feeling alone anyway, which is the worst kind of loneliness because there is no one to blame and nowhere to put it. She thought about the word choice and how long it had been since it had felt like something that belonged to her. She did not sleep much. In the morning, she was still thinking. By afternoon, she had made her peace with something, and this time it was real. She told Kael that evening, not dramatically, not with tears or accusations. She sat across from him at the desk in his study, where she had waited for him countless times, and she said simply that she was going to leave. He looked up from his papers. For the first time in longer than she could measure, he was fully there, both eyes on her face. No distraction, no half-attention. He was finally, completely present. "Seraphine," he said. "I know," she said. "I know what you are going to say." "I did not see—" "You did not look," she said. Not angry, just accurate. He sat very still. He was not a man who had been told hard truths often, and she watched him take this one in, the particular way it landed, the particular shape it had. There was pain in his face. She registered it. She did not feel her chest move. She stood up and said goodnight, and went to her room and packed one bag. Not the ceremonial robes, not the formal jewelry, the small photograph of her mother. The book with the cracked spine that she had read 4 times and would read again. A green sweater that was too old to be appropriate, but fit exactly right. Her mother's ring, from her right hand, not the bonding ring from her left. She left the bonding ring on the bedside table without ceremony. She walked out before the pack was awake. She knew what was coming. She knew the whispers that would move through 3 territories. She knew the words that would be used about her. Disloyal, unstable. She had spent a long time being afraid of those words. She walked through the quiet morning anyway, her bag over one shoulder, her feet very certain on the path. Darian's territory was half a day's travel. He was in his courtyard when she arrived, speaking with 2 of his men about something that looked like building plans. He looked up and saw her, and the conversation stopped. She said, "You said there was a choice." "I did," he said. "I am choosing." He nodded. He did not make a speech. He did not say anything that would be worth quoting. He told the men they were finished for the morning, and he walked with her inside, and he showed her a room that had a window looking out at the hills, and said she could stay as long as she needed before deciding anything further. No pressure, no expectations, just space. That was what got her. Not the grand gesture. Not the offer of an eternal bond, or the fact that the moon had apparently written her name somewhere in his bones. What got her was the window and the hills and the quiet weight of being in a room where no one needed her to be small. The bond did not arrive like a lightning strike, the way the old stories said. It settled like winter settling into a landscape, slowly, completely, in every corner at once. Over weeks she felt it find her, felt Darian feel her feeling it, felt the particular warmth of being known by someone who had chosen to know her. She cried in front of him 3 weeks after she arrived, not in the bathroom, not with the faucet running. She was sitting in the kitchen in the afternoon reading, and something in the book hit her in a way she was not prepared for, and the tears came before she could stop them. He looked up from his own work, at the other end of the table. She braced for something, comfort or questions, or the careful performance of not noticing. He said, "Good book?" She laughed. She was still crying, and she laughed. "Very good book," she said. He nodded and went back to his papers. She thought about all the faucets she had run over 7 years, and what they had cost her, what all that quiet hiding had done to the inside of her. She thought about what it meant to be witnessed in a small, unremarkable moment, and have it treated as exactly that. Small, unremarkable, allowed. She thought about Kael. She did not think about him with bitterness. She thought about him the way you think about a season that has passed, with a kind of tired fondness for what it was, and a clear understanding of why it is over. He had not been a bad man. He had been an absent one. And she had been so afraid of taking up space that she had made herself smaller and smaller until there was barely enough of her left to grieve what she was losing. Darian had not rescued her from that. She had walked out herself, before dawn, one bag, both feet moving. He had simply been the person who made it possible to believe that there was somewhere worth walking to. She turned the page. Outside the window, the hills went gold in the late afternoon light, and the bond sat warm and settled in her chest, and she was, for the first time in 7 years, simply home.